So I recently published a book. The title of it is Erotic Liberation. You can find a link to buy it down in the description of this video. It's available through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The book covers a variety of different subjects. It's really a collection of lectures that I've done over the last 4 years. It touches on subjects like liberation, true will and magic. It touches on issues of aesthetics, beauty, art creation, and magic. I talk about the creed of the Gnostic Mass, initiation, all different kinds of subjects. It's not a systematic work. It's not as though I take a single idea and develop it over the course of the entire book. It really just touches on a lot of different subjects that are related to Thelema and related to magic. But in the introduction to the book, I lay out different themes that unite the various essays together. And so what I wanted to do was make a few videos that talk a little bit more in depth about those themes and how I understand them, that go into a little more depth than I go to in the introduction. And so for this first video, I was going to talk about the first theme that I mentioned in the introduction, which is that Thelema is at minimum about 2 and not about 1. So what do I mean by that? So the first principle of Thelema is what Crowley calls the Kabbalistic zero. He refers to it as nothingness extended in no categories. And so from a certain perspective, Thelema does reduce down to one first principle, but the way that that first principle expresses itself is through the dynamic interplay of opposites. And because Thelema, its theory of reality, has to do with the dynamic interplay of opposites, and because this first principle is always expressing itself that way, that puts certain limitations on any kind of monistic interpretation of Thelema. So when I say a monistic interpretation, what I mean is an interpretation of Thelema according to which everything reduces to or is an expression of a single principle. So, for example, the idea that everything in the universe is an expression of a single deity, whether it's God or Brahman, or even whether it's something more abstract like universal consciousness, nature, beingness as a whole, all of these different sorts of interpretations, you have to be very careful with them because they run the risk of effacing this very important dimension of Thelema, which is that reality expresses itself through dynamic interplay, through becoming. And one of the really important implications of this is that we run the risk of saying that change is not real. And that would be something that Crowley would be very resistant toward. Because if you have a monistic interpretation of reality, of the sort where you think that what is most real is what is most constantly present, that never undergoes change, Crowley would object to that. He would say that that's not the first principle of his system. He would say that change is part of the fundamentals of reality. And that actually has a lot of really important implications for Thelema, which we can explore in some subsequent videos. So you have to be very careful about monistic interpretations, and I think that it rules out any kind of reductionistic interpretation where you can say like, oh, well, anything and everything that we can know about reality really comes down to what we can know about the Kabbalistic zero or some other first principle or some other kind of metaphysical idea. And that would run the risk of turning Thelema into a form of rationalism, which I think Crowley would be very resistant toward. So that's one of the first implications of Thelema being about 2 and not about 1. Of these dynamic opposites, the most important are, of course, Nuit and Hadit, the deities represented in the first and second chapters of the Book of the Law, respectively. So Crowley describes Nuit and Hadit in various ways across different texts and passages, but really what it comes down to is that Nuit is the cause or the principle of form or appearance. So the way something looks, not in a literal sense of how it looks with your eyes, but just in the sense that something is intelligible at all, that it has any kind of beingness, or that it would have any kind of essence, that is owing to Nuit. So Nuit serves a function in Thelema similar to what the mind of God serves in the theology of Thomas Aquinas. So Aquinas said that God has essence and God has existence, and all essences come from the mind of God, whereas all existences come from the will of God. And in Thelema, all essence comes from Nuit, and whereas the existence comes from Hadit, who is more closely related with the will of God and also with the will of the individual human being. Hadit is the principle of absolute, irreducible individuality. Hadit is the point in the center of the circle. Unlike Nuit, which is like a vast ocean of being and where nothing is fundamentally different from anything else, Hadit is a privileged point. Hadit is a center point. To say that there is a center point in space means that there is a privileged point in space. Not all points are the same, right? There's one that lies at the center, and that is how Hadit expresses himself. So for each individual, they have a Hadit at the center of them, which defines the center of their universe. So the center of my universe is not the same as the center of your universe. And that's very, very different from Nuit, who cannot be divided, right, at all without causing pain. And so that's the fundamental difference there between Nuit and Hadit. It's like the difference between essence and existence in Western philosophy. And Crowley says that the central truth of Thelema, the central truth of Thelema as a philosophy, as a theory of reality, is that Nuit and Hadit are always together. He says, our central truth, apart from other philosophies, is that these two infinities, meaning Nuit and Hadit, never exist apart. In other words, they are always together. And every time that these two come together, they form an actual individual, a soul, what he sometimes calls an adventuring God, or what the Book of the Law calls a star. And so that means that the star, who and what we fundamentally are in the deepest part of ourselves, is actually a two-in-one phenomenon. It is a combination of Nuit, which is essence or appearance or form, and Hadit, which is absolute individuality, which drives change in that form. So when you combine these two together, an individual is a manifest existence or individuality that is undergoing constant change of form. And so this is why this idea of the adventuring God is so important. Each of us is at the root of who and what we are. We are hungering for change. We're hungering for experience. And so from a certain perspective, a kind of macrocosmic or cosmological perspective, any change whatsoever is good, right? Hadit affirms every single change that occurs, because every single change that occurs is another instance of him uniting with Nuit and eliciting or soliciting some new appearance or some kind of form out of her. And so that tells you a lot about what the ideal of the individual is from a Thelemic perspective, and sort of the perspective that we're trying to ascend to with the Thelemic spiritual path. It's about trying to come up to this point where we experience life not as something sorrowful or painful, but rather as a great adventure or a great challenge, or even a love relationship, an erotic relationship, right? So that's the first of the 4 or 5 principles that I talk about in the introduction. And subsequent videos, I'll talk about more of them. Most of them, the other ones are really implications of this first one. This one is really important because it covers what Crowley calls the central truth of Thelema, which is that Nuit and Hadit always exist together. And this, one of the really significant things about this central truth is that it's a 2-in-1 truth. It's not a single thing that he's pointing to. He's pointing to the belonging together of two principles. It's the two principles and their dynamic interplay or their dynamic interaction that makes the world appear the way that it is, and which makes our lives appear the way that they are, and which really kind of spells out for us what the path of liberation is in this life. So hopefully you found this interesting. If you do, please leave a comment and let me know you want to see more videos about this, and hit the like button. And links to buy the book are in the footer. If you buy the book and read it, please leave a review on Amazon. It definitely helps put it out there a little more and push it up in the algorithm. And yeah, I look forward to making more of these videos for you shortly. 93.